somehow I think we think it's weakness to like,
Right.
oh, hey, bro, I'm not doing good.
Yeah.
You go to war with a whole company of warriors. You don't go by yourself.
Yeah.
Like a select number of people go in like alone and unafraid. It's
Yep.
like 5 in the whole, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
even the top dudes, the special operations guys, they're going in with a team of like 12 bros that can like really do some work. So I don't
Yeah.
know why we get in this mindset of when it comes to our marriages or being parents
Yeah.
or at work, like we think we have to just like shoulder it all alone and figure it all out. And like there's a good, having a good strong work ethic and trying to be a problem solver. That's a good thing.
Yep.
But I solve a lot of problems by bouncing it off of a good smart friend first, and then go,
Yeah.
hey, what about this? And you go, oh, man, helpful.
I am so excited to be speaking at the Conscious Investor Growth Summit, March 8th through the 10th, out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's going to be an amazing event. I'm so honored to be speaking alongside 20 plus amazing other speakers. And we're going to be deep diving into health, wealth, and mindset. You do not want to miss this event. Make sure that you find your way there. Also, use the code ERIK, E-R-I-K, for 50% off your ticket. I hope to see you there. Keep changing the world.
George, you're a husband, father, veteran, athlete. You're the host of the Present Fathers podcast and so much more. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to kick things off by going back a bit. Where did you grow up and what was childhood like for you?
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, outside Portland, Oregon, in a town called Beaverton.
Yeah.
Early childhood, pretty good. Had the happy 90s kid lifestyle, played in the cul-de-sac with all my friends, rode our bikes everywhere. I'm the oldest of 3, so it's me and then my younger brother, and then we have a younger sister.
Nice.
She was kind of the princess of the house, as you can
course.
imagine. 2 boys first, so
Totally.
yeah, there's no animosity there whatsoever. No,
Right.
But in all seriousness, like my early childhood was awesome. Middle school, high school age started getting a little rough.
Okay.
My parents ended up divorcing when I was 16. Actually, I think they divorced like the week of my birthday when I was 16.
Wow.
Or like right around it. So it was like wham wham, got my driver's license and my parents split up. So that was kind of like, trying to go to a very high level, my growing up.
Sure.
But, despite all the family drama and hardship and things like that, I look back with a lot of gratitude for, the life I had and all the blessings that I had. And, I think a lot of it ended up making me the man I am today. And so you can't help but look back and be thankful for any of those experiences. But
totally.
Yeah.
Gives you resilience.
Through, I'm on the on the older edge of the millennial generation, and life was good back then, man.
Right.
Ride bikes till the sun went down. So
totally, man. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, thank you again for your service. Like, when did you decide that you wanted to join, and what inspired you to go that route?
So I was always like really intrigued by the military. You'd go to the state fair or whatever, and they've got the National Guard out there or whatever with their display, the Humvee, and they got a tow missile on top. Oh, cool, and you'd go play Army in the woods. And so I was always like really like, the military is awesome. I really got serious about it in high school.
Okay.
I really started looking into it. And I'm like, hey, I think I want to do this. I was for a while thinking maybe I wanted to be like in the medical field. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to like med school or something. And I took chemistry in high school. And I was like, nope. Med school. I got an okay grade, but I was like, this stuff sucks. I'm not doing that. So I switched to like, hey, I'm going to go in the Army. I applied to get an ROTC scholarship. I didn't even know any better. Like I didn't know the difference between like officer and enlisted.
Gotcha.
No one really in my family had really been in the military. So yeah, it was something I always felt called to. And if I really boil it down, like number one reason is I wanted to serve my country and be a bigger part, part of something bigger than myself.
Yep.
I was in 7th grade when 9/11 happened. So that to say that marked my life is an understatement. I think pretty much everyone around my age has a very similar experience from that. And so I think I always was enamored with it. 9/11 happened, and then it was probably like, hey, I think this is almost certainly what I'm going to do when I'm an adult. And so yeah, that was kind of the drive behind it. And went to the University of Oregon with a full 4-year scholarship to do ROTC, and graduated, commissioned, and off to your basic course, and then you join the real force. So back then, it was 2012 by the time I got to the 101st Airborne, and that was like right at the height still of hey, show up, deploy, and
sure.
So yeah, I was there for like 2 months, and we were downrange. So
wow,
things move quick.
That's crazy. I got one recruitment call when I was 18. I wish that I would have gotten more. I kick myself. I'm 44 now. I kick myself all the time for not joining, right? And not getting out there. That one call I got, I was 18 years old. I was a big time stoner, always doing drugs. And I remember like this guy called me and I'm like, who the hell is this, man? Like, oh no, man, I ain't got time for this. So I can just blew it off. I wish I would have gotten a couple other calls to like come back in, because my life would have changed obviously way different. I spent a lot of time in drugs and alcohol and lost, man. But man, it's, I'm just so thankful when I see soldiers walk around and first responders. My kids are 13 and 10, and my wife and I, anytime we see them in town, they're first responders, they're like, oh, Dad, look, there's a guy in the army, let's go say hi. Like they love to be able to say thank you. And man, it's just one of those moments where I go, dang it, I wish I would have done that.
I mean, if I can speak to that point, I think there's, your specific story obviously probably would have gone a lot different, right? And so I'm not discrediting that desire, but I think a lot of people kind of feel almost this guilt now, like, oh, I didn't serve post 9/11, so I'm lesser than. And man, if we were all soldiers, our country would suck. Like, there's a lot of bad things about us. We're not like the best people in the world, Like at the end of the day, I'm a guy, put on a different uniform. Some people put on a suit. I put on a uniform. And I haven't done that for a long time now. I'm in the National Guard now, so I pretend to be in the Army once a month. But I think being an upstanding citizen means a lot more than just being in the military. And I'm super proud of the military. I really love everything I've done, and I've met amazing people. But it's definitely not for everyone.
Right.
And again, I think if you look at our country as a whole, like we need people to be more than just soldiers or first responders. Like huge respect to first responders. I think actually they get not enough credit. I think the military gets too much credit.
Sure.
I would much rather have to deal with Army stuff than like what police have to deal with. I think they have it the worst. But I say all that to say that if you're listening to this and maybe you feel like, oh, I didn't join the military, so I can't serve my country. That's absolutely not true. I think if you are an upstanding citizen, you're doing good things in your local community, like that makes a difference. And that is serving,
huge.
It's not just shooting a gun.
Yep. Totally.
Hey, this is a quick shout out from one of our awesome sponsors. Check this out. Thank you to Tracy down at Tranquil Turtle Massage in downtown Coeur d'Alene. Look, my wife and I, we see Tracy and her team every single month for couples massage, and it is the best thing. Tracy is a master massage specialist and a Hanu Ashiatu trainer. You need to reach out to Tracy and her team. Make sure that you tell them that I sent you, and you'll get $25 off your next massage. Also, while you're there, check out CDA Brows, Body, and Ink. Make sure to tell Tracy that I sent you, and you'll save $100 on your next tattoo brows and plasma tightening services.
Well, how has like being in the military shaped the way that you approach being a dad, and what advice do you give to those younger dads that are in the military?
Yeah, I think initially it shaped me in maybe a little bit of the wrong way. I was way too intense about a lot. I was a very intense guy. Still am, but I've mellowed and I've learned and stretched. But in a lot of ways, though, it also made me really good because I'm very disciplined. Like I didn't need someone to tell me what to do. I just like took action and stuff. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like some of the things that make you really good as a military leader can apply to like marriage and raising kids, but you need to temper it with a different approach. Like the principles are the same, but the way you show up is different. So, it's a softer tone. It's getting on their level. You can't talk to them like soldiers because they're children. And,
right.
So my advice for dads who are especially in the military or a high stress job like that, police, fire, or something where you're like, you have to be on at work and you have to have kind of an authoritative persona. Is to look into this book called The Alter Ego Effect. And this is something I'd kind of inherently done my whole life. And then I read this book and I was like, wow, okay. And I like took it to the next level. But he gives a specific example in that book. It's by Todd Herman, of where he had met like this, special forces commander, colonel or something. And the guy basically asked him like, I really struggle with my kids. And he was like, just make a new alter ego, like make your dad alter ego. So when you come home and take off your uniform, you're not the colonel anymore. You're dad,
Right.
And that would be my advice, is to kind of play with that concept.
Yeah.
Because it's really like the military is so all consuming, right? Active duty, like you live and breathe it. Your family lives and breathe it. It is your life. And it's very hard to separate because a lot of ways you're praised, you're validated as a man in uniform for like being all those things. But a lot of times that's the wrong instrument when you come home. You're a hammer looking for a nail when in reality you need to be a tender hug, right?
Yes.
So maybe playing with that alter ego effect concept. It's a really easy read too for anyone listening.
Nice.
Easy book to get through. very simple concept. Developing, hey, I'm home. I'm dad now. I'm not the soldier anymore. That is probably the one thing I wish I would have known up front, because I probably would have showed up better as a husband and a father.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people talk about that work-life balance life, and you got to be able to balance this. And like, as in your position, trying to balance being a dad and a husband and being in the military and having this podcast, like, does that all just blend together, or is there some sort of balance that you're able to kind of put into play and separate the items there?
Well, so I haven't done all this all at once, right? I left active duty in 2016. I actually had a break in service of almost 3 years, and then I joined the National Guard.
Gotcha.
And I joke now that the Guard is just enough Army in my life.
Okay.
So
Totally.
in terms of work-life balance with the military, it's actually really good now.
Nice.
There are times where I miss active duty. There's a lot of great things about it, but I also kind of reflect that and compare and contrast things that my family's done, where if we were active, we probably wouldn't have been able to do. So I don't think I would make a different decision if I could go back.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. I'm a little conflicted on that one. Like, I think it depends on what you're working on, right?
Sure.
Like if you're doing something that has real purpose, and like you're really giving it your all, and like, and your family knows that it's what you were put on the earth to do, type of thing, then I think that is different than like, I'm in this dead end job that I absolutely hate and I have to be here 70 hours a week or something. That's a very different scenario.
Totally.
Right? Because now you're just robbing time from the family. So I think if we can peel that back a little bit, peel the onion on it, it's more of like, are you living through, like, with your purpose? Are you accomplishing your purpose? And I think you could get caught up too much in it, but I think your family typically tends to understand a little bit better, and maybe it doesn't cause issues if you're really like doing something that matters, because it's part of like, hey, the family is also giving to that as well, in a sense. So I think for anyone listening on active duty, some of it might just be having a real conversation with your spouse, right? Like, hey, honey, is this still working? Like, can we, wherever you are to getting to retirement, like having that conversation periodically. Hey, babe, can we keep going? Like, are we going to be able to make it doing this? And it sounds really simple, but if you don't talk about it, you're going to make assumptions, and deep down, your spouse may be like, absolutely not. Like, you need to find an exit plan immediately, right? And hey, I got to shift, and that was, for me, that was a big reason. Like, it was, we had a really hard time with the birth. My wife had like severe postpartum, like hospitalized and all kinds of stuff. It was rough.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, hey, this Army thing, I probably need to make a career change here, because I need to be around more. That's not a knock on my wife. I love her so much. She's an incredible mother and wife, and I'm so thankful for her. But it was kind of that wake up call of like, I'd really love to do 20 years, but I don't think I can.
Sure, man. I think it's gosh, yeah. The whole, once you bring kids into the marriage, the dynamics change. My wife and I spent 5 years just being us. Right. And before we started having kids, and we went on missions trips down to Mexico and built homes and things like that. We almost moved to Mexico. We just loved it down there, just being able to build homes and stuff. And it's funny because I'm not a tool person at all. I grew up, my dad would just say, hey, pay people to do stuff. And my wife, she grew up with her grandfather was a shop teacher for 30 years. So he had every tool known to man and taught her how to do everything. I never even changed a tire or brakes or spark plug until I married my wife. And then he was like, get over here. And I was like, the kid holding the flashlight at 35 years old, right? Like,
no higher.
That type of situation. But man, your podcast, it's the Present Fathers podcast. It's all about climbing this mountain of fatherhood together, which I think that's an amazing thing. I think there's too many dads that try to do this alone. And I know that I've kind of wandered in the wilderness alone for a long time, but what's been the most unexpected, like, peak or challenging kind of terrain that you've encountered so far in your own journey, and how did you get through that?
I think so. When it came to being a dad, I never really had any huge struggles. I think for me, it was our marriage, right? Our marriage is super turbulent. We've been married just over 10 years now. Okay. And I mean, like 9.5 of them have been pretty rough, if I'm being just blatantly honest.
Sure.
But that affected how I showed up as a dad. I mean, like, I knew what I needed to do as a dad, but it's like when you're not in sync with your wife, like that, you both show up as a worse version of yourself for your kids. So I think for me, that was the biggest thing, because I think maybe that's a lot of guys out there like, oh, I'll just be the best dad I can be and nothing else matters. It's like, your marriage is actually priority number one, and then the kids, in my book.
Totally. Yeah.
I say things to my daughter like, hang on, I'm going to kiss mom first when I get home, or
Right.
don't talk to my wife that way. Like
Mm-hmm.
I use language like that because I want to model for her that having a strong, loving marriage is like priority number one, and
Yeah.
and the kids are protected under that relationship. So they need to know that they're number two while they're children,
Mm-hmm.
because they're kind of looking for that. That was my struggle, was how I showed up as a husband,
Yeah.
and I think it really detracted from my role as dad. And
Mm-hmm.
as I leveled up being a better husband, I naturally showed up better. And I have a daughter, so I'm a girl dad.
Yeah.
That was an adjustment, of course. Boys, you don't know girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've really had to learn empathy. That is a weak point for me. There's always been a weakness. I'm a very
Yep.
cold, like calculated type of guy.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence and empathy have been like, the more I get skilled at those
Mm-hmm.
things,
Yep.
the better I can relate to the women in my family. And I think that's very important.
So important, man. My daughter's 13 and my son is 10. And that was something where I think I lacked as well, as that empathy area.
Yeah.
Right. And
I think we all do.
My wife and I, we both came from broken homes. And so we had
Mhm.
no example of a good marriage. And we didn't know, like, we knew what we didn't want, but we didn't have any good examples of what really to do.
Yeah.
Right.
We were a lot like that.
And I think the first 5 years, we just kind of were trying to get to know each other, like how do we do this marriage thing? And I still struggle in that area of like communication, right? Like I try to do everything on my own and try to like, I can do this, and not let her in on some of the business stuff that I do. And, that's some of the struggles that I've done. And I've had to give the dad voice, like, hey, you can't talk to mom that way. Right. Like that type of stuff, because, it's just, that's how it is, man. As a dad, like, my job is to protect my wife and make sure that she's there. And our kids know that we're going to argue, but we're also going to make up. We're going to kiss in the kitchen.
Yeah.
We're going to dance in the kitchen. Right. And they see us argue. They see us make up. And it's interesting. This year we brought our kids home to do homeschool. And so I've been
Nice.
working from home since 2015. So all four of us are in the house all day long, every day.
There's
and
some challenges with that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, my office is upstairs, so I'll see when I go downstairs to get coffee or something like that. But it definitely makes for some adjustments that I have to make. If I go down there and school's not going as well as it should, like, I'm like, do I step in? Do I not? Like,
Right.
one of those moments. But
Mhm.
man, how did your podcast come together? Like, people need to be listening to this show, by the way, because I love your show, man. It's a great show, but it looks like you do this with not just yourself. There's other dads that are involved in this. Like, how did you guys bring this together?
Yeah. So we are a group of 4 friends.
Okay.
2 of them are twin brothers. So,
okay.
They've known each other their whole lives.
Nice.
And then, so it's myself, Dustin, Justin, and Brandon. Okay. And Justin and Brandon are the twins. But long story short, we've been friends for a very, very long time. We've always stayed in touch. We all live in different parts of the country, but we've always stayed in touch. And really, like, during COVID timeframe, we were like, man, just so upset with like the direction of our country, and like kind of the lack of just like men stepping up, and especially dads. And then like looking into stats of like fatherlessness and broken homes, and and how that leads to drug abuse, and statistically your odds are significantly higher. And we're like, we got to do something about this. And we were like, well, what can we do? And with COVID times and limited resources and stuff, we were like, well, let's start a podcast. And really the only goal we had to start out was just, if we can just help one guy be a better dad, then mission accomplished.
Huge.
And we'll probably learn some things in the process. So we stayed faithful to that, and just kept putting out episodes and learning and growing. And if I can kind of circle back to your earlier question, like that's like the number 2 thing I didn't do well, was I isolated. And I didn't have guys around me to either help me, like, just to be a shoulder to cry on type of thing,
Sure.
Hear me out, or to hold me accountable and be like, hey bro, not the way to talk to your wife. Don't ever do that. You know what I mean?
Yep. Totally.
And I think we really need that as men. Like, we need both the pure respect of like, hey man, I see you, I really love what you're doing, I respect you, like we need that affirmation deep down.
Yep.
If you don't admit that, then I'd argue you probably don't have it. So once you
Totally.
feel that, it changes how you walk around the rest of your world,
Yeah.
But we also need, I think, accountability, right? We tell good stories to ourselves, and we lie to ourselves about how good we really are, and then maybe not, and so sometimes having that strong friend who really knows you to your core, is a very valuable tool to help you reassess, like, oh, maybe I do need to show up better as a dad. But that was a huge goal we wanted to accomplish with this podcast, was to like help guys understand how important that brotherhood is. So that's why everything we did in the name is super intentional. Present meaning like present day, right? We're going to tackle modern issues and help men today, be better for their families.
Yep.
But it's also presence, like being with your families. And I understand, like I'm a military guy. Like I understand what it means to be away from your family. It's not necessarily all of the time, but like when you're there, how are you showing up? That's what we're trying to get to.
Huge.
And then with the logo, the mountains and everything, right? Like climbing a mountain is very hard work. And you can't do it alone. You have to have a team, and support structure and everything to make it happen. So that's kind of like the final kind of meaning behind the name was, and climbing the mountain together, is that you can't do it alone.
Yep.
We need each other, like when he's anchored in above you and you fall, well, you're still on the rope, so you can get back up,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
didn't have that, you're toast. So I say all that to say that the final outcome of the mountain is sometimes we think, the peak is here, right? And we climb it and we crest the hill. And we see there's actually more. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's not like, oh, there's so much more work to do. It's as you grow and level up, both as a man, as a husband, as a father, there's more goodness that you can walk into, right? Like it's not like you hit level 10 and get stuck. It goes up to level 100 and then you hit 100 and it hits 1,000. And that's the beauty of like what a strong marriage and involved fatherhood ultimately accomplishes is it changes bloodlines. It helps the next generation and it sets them up for success. And so, we were all super passionate about that. We just got started, a year and a half ago.
Come on.
Like we're just going to commit to this. And if this is one small mark we can leave on society, the mission accomplished. So
it's so important to have that brotherhood of other dudes, that guy that can call you out when you're kind of being a jerk or a jackass, right? Like in a good way, right? Like it's so important to have that guy. And that guy for me is a guy named Kelly Cardenas. And man, I went down to California to an event called Prosperity Camp. It was a guy named Greg Reed had this event, and he was on my podcast and he does this event and he invited me down. There's only 50 people allowed. 49 of them are millionaires. I'm the one that's not, right? Like I go in there, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I had no money. I was using air miles to get down there. I was staying at Motel 6. I was going to walk 3 miles to his house. Like I just knew that I wanted to be in that room though. Right.
Yeah.
And I got down there and I met this guy named Kelly, and he invited me to go watch the sunrise at the beach down in Carlsbad. And I was in this mindset of like, all I wanted to do was be this full-time entrepreneur. I wanted to quit my 9-to-5, just do full-time entrepreneurship. And I remember sitting there on the beach and I was talking with Kelly and I was like, man, I just want to do this so bad. And I remember him looking at me and goes, Erik, of all these people that you've met this weekend, they're all successful entrepreneurs. They're all millionaires. He goes, but how many of them have successful marriages? And I was like, oh, that was like an eye-opening moment for me, because I could probably count on one hand the number of people that were married one time in that whole building that I met, right? Like crazy. And it was super eye-opening for me to hear that. And then of course, Kelly's been one of my friends. I talk to him every week now, but he's such a real dude. And if I didn't have him in my life, man, it would just be, I would feel at a loss, man. But you got to have that accountability, I think, for guys. Man, when you're talking, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's not weakness either. Like somehow I think we think it's weakness to like, oh, hey bro, I'm not doing good.
Yeah.
You go to war with a whole company of warriors. You don't go by yourself. Like a select number of people go in like alone and unafraid. It's like 5 in the whole, you know what I mean? Like even the top dudes, the special operations guys, they're going in with a team of like 12 bros that can like really do some work. So I don't know why we get in this mindset of when it comes to our marriages or being parents or at work, like we think we have to just like shoulder it all alone and figure it all out. And like there's a good, having a good strong work ethic and trying to be a problem solver, that's a good thing. But I solve a lot of problems by bouncing it off of a good, smart friend first, and then go, hey, what about this? And you go, oh, man, helpful. And then you knock it out, So if you're listening to this and like you don't have friends like that, go make the effort. It is the highest. It's like it's going to pay off so much for you in every aspect of your life to have real friends who really know you, the real you. And it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable when you start building up that relationship. Like, hey, man, like, I'm not going to lie. I just really need a good, close friend that I can confide in. That's going to make them feel good. Like, whoa, this dude thinks that I'm good enough to be like his confidant,
Right.
Anyway.
No, I think that's huge, man. I think too many guys and dads, we fail to ask that 4-letter word, man. We fail to ask for help. right? And we just want to isolate ourselves, like you said, man. And it's so important for us to do that. Man, for you as a dad, like what are those daily habits, non-negotiables that you implement to really make your day a success as a husband and as a father?
Yeah, I start like basically when I wake up.
Okay.
So I do a thing, I call it like a creed.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially I write down, and it's a living document, so it's always updating with whatever new season of life comes in, or maybe something happens and I realize, oh, this is a weak point I need to reemphasize. But it's essentially just telling myself, reminding myself of these are the qualities and attributes that George needs to be or wants to be for his family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's offense, right? I'm starting the day telling myself like this is who I'm going to be, right? As opposed to like, well, I'll just hold my shield up and hope that like when life's arrows get shot at me, I can block them. It's like that's not a great strategy, right?
Totally.
So I start with the creed. It's morning prayer and meditation, that kind of stuff. And so if you're not religious, just taking some time to journal the previous day, I do that. I take a personal inventory, and it's very basic. It's just like, hey, was yesterday good? What wasn't good? It takes me 10 seconds. It's very quick.
Yeah.
And then what I've started doing recently is almost every single day, I take a little sticky note and write just a personal affirmation to my wife and one to my daughter, and I stick them around the house in places that they're going to find them later.
Yeah.
And that's just like it takes me again 10 seconds maybe to write these notes, and that makes a humongous like payout for them. My daughter like showed me excitedly where she's storing every single one I'm writing to her. So it's those little things that I think it just sets you up in your day, and that's how I've kind of your day is going to happen, right? Work's going to be work or whatever's going to happen, and you can't control those things. But when you start grounded in those basics and you do it on a consistent basis, you start to believe them about yourself too, right? A lot of this is up here, in your head, and by kind of getting into it first thing in the day, I think it just sets me up on the right footing. It's a good foundation to handle whatever life throws at me.
Man, that's huge. I love the sticky notes for your daughter. I think that's one thing that I've not been consistent with is writing my kids' notes. My wife, 3 years ago, I started doing Post-it notes. So every morning I do a Post-it note and put it on the mirror. And at the end of the year, she's like, "This is awesome, but I don't know what to do with them." And I was like, "Well, how do I keep track of these things?" So I bought like these 5x8 hardcover journal books. And so now when I wake up, before I leave the bathroom in the morning, I'm writing like a 3-sentence just, "Hey, babe, you're awesome. Thank you for doing this yesterday." Or, "Man, I'm sorry, I screwed up big time last night." Like and that calls for conversation, but at least that gives me some sort of like, I want to express that first thing in the morning and talk about that. But, and so we've got these books now for the last couple of years that she can go through, and every day I've written in that, thing. And even when I go on business trips, I still write in that book while I'm on business trip, and I'll come back and give it to her. She can read, 3 or 4 days. But I would say it's created some great conversations between my wife and I, and just having that. But I think your idea of writing to your daughter and putting those notes everywhere, man, I think that's huge. I think I need to definitely implement that for my son and my daughter for sure, man.
Yeah, and I think for both your son and your daughter, I think they're both a little bit different. They're probably important in different ways,
sure,
but I think equally of equal value, right? So for your son, I mean, like wanting to have your dad be proud of you is like, I mean, what son doesn't want that, right? I mean, that's like you're born and want that, like that's just par for the course. So
totally,
like having that affirmation, I mean, that's like putting on armor, like he's gonna be ready to rock, that's superpower really. But then for your daughter, I think it's very different. It's you're modeling for her what she should expect in a man as a future husband,
huge.
And that's something I've really done a lot of like thinking and learning on is, my daughter's 8. She's gonna start dating probably in like, teenage years, not that far away.
Yeah.
Like what type of dad do I want to be during that phase? And, I think the work I'm doing now, how I show up now shapes how she's going to start being interested in boys, right? Like if he's just some jerk and I've modeled the opposite, she'll be like, "That guy's a jerk."
Right.
But if I've modeled being a jerk, guess what? she's going to think that's normal. So I've been very, 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 very intentional on that one because that doesn't scare me necessarily, but I think it's wise to be aware of like what the future holds and to plan for it. And man, yeah, I don't want my daughter to, well, and I pray for whoever my future son-in-law is going to be.
Yeah.
Right? I want her to have
big time
an amazing man that like I want for a son myself, and I think we joke about that, like, oh, I'll have the gun ready for when he brings you home, or whatever. It's like, I don't know if that's the right approach, because then she's not going to want to talk to you about, oh, he was mean to me or whatever. I'm like, hey, babe, that's not okay. Like,
right
now I'll go get my gun. Like,
it's interesting. My wife and I joke about that all the time. Like, my daughter, she's not dating anyone, and I don't think that she even wants to. But like, we don't own property yet. But I always say, hey, look, when the boys start coming over, I'm going to make them dig their own little 6-foot grave out in the backyard, right? And we'll see it, measure them up, right? Like, just in case, buddy, this is where you're going to end up, because no one will find you. Like that type of thing. Man, I know that we're over time. I love to ask one final last question, though.
Do it.
Man, I'm a big music guy, so I've asked the question. Like, you're a '90s kid. What's a favorite band for you? What type of music do you like to listen to?
So I did not listen to like mainstream stuff.
Okay.
I'm kind of a weirdo. My like favorite band of all time is Dream Theater.
Okay.
You know who that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I didn't listen to him in the '90s, but it's just because I hadn't heard of him. But
right.
I guess I was always like, I like guitar. I started playing when I was 11, I think.
Okay. Cool.
So I always like was drawn to like really good electric guitar playing.
Sure.
And my first guitar teacher like shredded for me one time, and I was like, how do I do that? And like, so I was kind of just hooked on all things rock and roll and whatnot. And I don't really remember like specific bands from the '90s, but yeah, man, Dream Theater, I've seen them live multiple times.
Oh, nice.
John Petrucci's like my guitar idol. I'm like, man, if I could have as much talent in my pinky as he has in his whole body, I could die happy. But yeah. So hopefully that resonates with you a little bit. But,
oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, dude.
All of 5 of your listeners will know who I'm talking about.
Dude, that's so good, man. I used to be just straight metalhead, Korn, Rob Zombie, like all those guys in high school. And then I started working for Universal Records, and they said, you actually do need to listen to other music if you want to work here. And so it kind of opened my eyes to, country and more hip hop. And actually the very first CD I ever owned was a band called Arrested Development. They had a song called Tennessee way back in the day. And funny thing, I was following Speech, the lead singer of Arrested Development, on Instagram, and I saw that he had this new documentary coming out. And I was like, I wonder if you'd want to be on my podcast. And I just shot him a message on Instagram. Sure enough, booked him on my podcast. So I got to interview the guy of the very first CD I ever owned, man. It was the coolest thing ever, dude.
Yeah. Man, that would be like a total bucket list if I could have John Petrucci on mine to talk about being a dad.
Right? I mean,
I'd have a hard time staying like level. I'd be like, can I get your autograph? Yeah.
It was interesting. And I kind of like did that fanboy thing when I worked for Universal Records. Like when I first started meeting rock stars, I was like, dude, I'm kind of nervous to meet this guy. Like hanging out backstage with Beck, I'm like, and Beck's like this tall. He's like on my shoulder, like super short guy, but really, really nice guy. But like, I definitely had that fanboy thing when I first had Speech on the show. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, just so you know, like you're the first thing ever out.
Yeah. And you're like, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So funny. But dude,
great, man.
George, this is such a great show, man. You're an absolute world changer, man. So excited to get to know you more and follow your stuff, man. People need to go check out your podcast, the Present Fathers Podcast, man. Thank you for your time, dude. I appreciate it.
Erik, thank you, man.
Thank you so much for checking out the show today. I really appreciate it. I hope that my guest was able to bring you some amazing wisdom and knowledge to help you continue to fight for your goals, your dreams, and your purpose. If you could do me one big favor and just hit that subscribe button, I would so appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Keep changing the world. I believe in you. Have an amazing day.